Welcome to A Word for Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Each Wednesday you will find Boggs Family Ministries is here with our host, Davy Boggs. Having you along with us is a wonderful addition. Now, let's enjoy together A Word for Wednesday.
Thank you, Brother Devin, and thank you for joining us today on A Word for Wednesday. I hope your week is going well. We are enjoying the blessings of the Lord. I want to go back again to the principle of making our decisions ahead of time. Maybe you need a refresher. We've been talking about it the last couple of weeks. I hate to go all the way through it again, the principle, but just real briefly, sometimes we're pushed into a place where we have to make decisions based on circumstances, and those circumstances may really press us to a decision that would not really be in our best interest, or the decision that we would make if we had time to really consider all the aspects of it, the spiritual aspects, the moral aspects of it. And so it's better to make those decisions before you get there. Make the decision based on principle so that when you're pushed into a place, the decision has already been made. I talked to you about, Kelly and I, our decision to be church people. We're going to go to church. We're not going to stay home. We're not going to stay home because we're tired. We're not going to stay home because we have company. We're not going to stay home because, we didn't have any peanut butter. We're going to church. Secondly, I talked to you about making the decision to be purposeful, planned givers. We're going to tithe. We're going to give. And we have been abundantly blessed with people giving to our ministry. We work in revivals. People give in response to that. And we're blessed by that. But I want to tell you, we're not going to grab that and hold on to it. Everything we receive, we're going to receive with open hands. If God wants it somewhere else, then we're going to bless somebody else. Purposeful, planned givers. We made that decision ahead of time. So when it's not easy to do, it doesn't matter if it's easy. We already made the decision. The third one I want to talk to you about is about work. Choice of career. A choice of what we do for a living. We made the decision, because we're church people, we're church-going people, we are not going to take a job, we're not going to choose a career that pulls us from our commitment of going to church. Now that was severely tested a couple of times in our lives. And I'm not sure I would have passed the test if we had not made the decision ahead of time. One year I desperately needed a job, and a friend of mine who had friends in high places recommended me for a job at a major corporation and set up the interview. Here's the time. You're going to meet with the boss. You're not meeting with a supervisor. This is the guy that runs the whole shebang. I said, thank you. Oh, I thank you so much, man. I need this job so bad. So I went in, and the man said, now listen, I've already made the decision based on the recommendation of our mutual friend. If you want the job, it's yours. And I said, oh, thank you. Just tell me about the job. He said, well, it's a third shift job. And it was actually like a 12-hour shift. He did like 4 12-hour shifts. And he said, so you're going to work, the guy we've got on days has been there for years. He's not changing. So it's going to be nights for the foreseeable future. Can you do that? I said, oh yeah, I'll work at night. Yeah, absolutely. He said, now it's Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. Well, that was a little bit of a problem, because I made a commitment years ago not to go to my job, not to work on Sunday. Our first Christmas of being married, I had just hired in at a factory less than 2 months before Christmas, about 7 weeks before Christmas. And they told us in orientation that all you new hires, you're gonna still be in your training period, so you're gonna work through Christmas. Well, that's okay. I said, yeah, sure, I'll work through Christmas. I need this job. But They didn't tell us then that we worked right on through the weekend, which we never did on that job. But we were new, we were in training, we didn't have any rights, so we didn't get paid extra. So they just took advantage of us. And I did it because I needed the job and didn't want it. And it was the worst decision I've ever made. I thought I'd make extra money in Christmas, and we ended up having less money than we'd ever had in January. So we've never done that again. So, I'm already thinking, oh, I hate to work Sunday, but if I can work Saturday night, and I can work Sunday night, and I can go to church on Sunday, I can do it. Then the kicker, he said, you'll start every evening at 6. Well, we had church Thursday night, so no church on Thursday. We had church Sunday night, so no church on Sunday night. So I could go Tuesday night to church and Sunday morning, but I'd work till 6 o'clock on Sunday morning, have to be back at work at 6 o'clock Sunday evening. So going to church on Sunday morning was going to be very difficult. So I was basically down to going to church every Tuesday and maybe on Sunday morning. With great regret, I turned that job down. And my friend who recommended me was disappointed in me, and that grieved me. I hated to disappoint him, but I could not take that job. And here's why. We had already made a decision. I'm not going to take a job that keeps me out of church. I'm not going to do it. If all I can do is one Tuesday night a week, that's not enough. I'm not going to. When I went home and I told Kelly, she was 100% with me because we had already made the decision. I had to inform that nice man, gentleman, about my decision, but I didn't have to make it in his office. The decision had already been made. Before that, we had been offered a job in another state. A man called me who I loved, and he loved me. And he said, hey, I know you're struggling. Come down here and I'll put you to work. And it seemed like, wow, this is great. But there was no good church in that area at all. I really didn't even think about it more than 3 seconds. Once I stopped and considered, there's no church. I said, no, thank you, but I can't do it. I can't do it. I want to do it, but I can't do it. When I got on the phone, my wife said, what was that? And I said, so-and-so want me to come and work. And she said, oh, we could never go there. There's no churches there. And because Kelly and I had already made the decision, we're not going to take jobs that pull us out of church. We're not going to build a career that pulls us out of church. It always frightens me when I see young people that are training for jobs that are notoriously so demanding that people that work those jobs cannot go to church. Why are we training for that job when we know it is committing us for several years and maybe all of our work life of never going to church on a regular basis? No, I made the commitment. I'm not going to take that job. Several years ago, when I was pastoring, I had an elder statesman of our movement come and preach for me, and I was so glad he got to come. He was retired from the pastorate, came and preached a couple nights. He was preaching one night. I don't remember what it was, but I mean, it was just awesome preaching. It was kind of treetop tall, and then he stopped. He said, I'm going to tell you a story. And he starts telling a story about when he was pastoring, and he pastored very successfully. He said a couple of families came to him, and it might have been 3 or 4 families, and said, there's a boom out in the next state over, a hiring boom. They're paying big money. We're going to go over there, and we're going to work a few years over there. They didn't ask him. They just told him that's what we're going to do. 2, 3, 4 families, young families, with kids. And he said, oh, is there a church over there? And they said, no, we haven't. Well, there's no church as far as we know, but we'll have church together. We're going to go make some money. We can't make any money here. Decision made. They went. He's telling this story in the church I'm pastoring during his preaching. Had nothing to do with his subject. It's just in my mind, okay, here's an older preacher. He just had some brain fog and he's just telling this story. And he said, years later, all of those couples came back to the church, settled in that area. 2, 3, 4 couples. They all came back, mom and dad, settled in that area, and went to heaven from his church. But none of their kids served God. Absolutely zero. So these 2, 3, or 4 families went out for a few years, maybe several years, and they made really good money in this boom industry. Came home with that money and lived a comfortable life and went to heaven and lost every one of their children. Now, when he said that in that service, I mean, I was knocked back on my heels. I'm like, wow, that should speak to someone, if there was anyone here to speak to. I didn't have a clue. And then he slipped right back into gear and went on with his message and finished that message. I had a wonderful altar service. And I had one of our young couples come to me and say, on the way to church, I said to my wife, I'm done with this place. I'm done with this city. I've got an education. I can make more money than this. We're moving. She said, well, is there going to be? I don't care. We're going to go somewhere where I can make some money and we'll find a church. And he said, that preacher read my story without knowing and totally turned that young man's mind around. They're still in that city that they were in that day, by the way, all these years later. That was powerful to me. That preacher saying, and he did say this in the story, they should have known better. I tried to tell them better. But here's what I say. If they had made a decision, I'm never taking a job that takes me away from a good church, they would have never been any more than tempted. The temptation would be there, but it would be settled. We've already made this decision, but without that pre-formed decision based on sound biblical principles and personal values, they made a decision that cost their children their souls. Now, you may think that's a little harsh, Brother Davey. How do you know that those children would have been saved if they'd have stayed there at their home church? I don't know that. But I promise you, they'd have got a better percentage of them than they did by taking them off where there was no church, no fellowship, no good morals, no solid biblical teaching on a regular basis. I promise you, if they'd have stayed in that home church, they'd have had a better chance of keeping their children in the faith and saved. And so, just another example of making our decisions ahead of time. They're much better when we make them ahead of time based on sound biblical principles and personal values. Now, I could probably go on and on and on with this series, and I may, I don't know. Let me know what you want to hear. I'm not always going to give you what you want to hear, but I see so much potential for this if we just make those decisions before the need. I think they'd be better decisions. That's our word for Wednesday. Thank you for coming. See you next week.
That is our word for Wednesday. We are so glad that you've spent a few minutes with us today. If you've been touched by today's episode, please share it with your friends and family. We welcome your questions or comments below or by email. You can find the email address in the description, along with a link to Mile Markers, the website for Boggs Family Ministries. Also, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next Wednesday.